Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at the 1993 and 1994 Leaf hockey sets. Donruss had a weird path with sports cards in the junk wax era because by 1991 we saw just about everybody was jumping over into another sport. Except for Donruss. For some reason they stayed with just one sport. Both Pro Set and Upper Deck in 1990, they both jumped over into hockey. And in 1992, even NBA Hoops Skybox jumped over into football. And we had a number of card brands that were specific to one sport. Action Pack it never broke into another major sport. And in 1991, we had Pacific and Proline and Wild Card, which were all dedicated to one sport, at least through 1993. And then 1992, we had Game Day and Collector's Edge and Playoff that were all dedicated to football. So there were a number of brands that were released as just one sport by 1993, but they were all very recent. Donruss, for over a decade, they were just baseball. So in 1992, the fact that they were just doing baseball cards was kind of weird. So in 1993, when they followed the lead of Upper Deck and Pro Set and launched into another sport, they did so in hockey. But unlike Score, Upper Deck, and Pro Set, where in 1990 they jumped into hockey where there was nothing, only to find that everybody showed up at the same time, by the time that Donruss showed up in hockey in 1993, there was a lot going on in that sport. And so it was already pretty crowded, and they were going to need to make a strong statement. Now, the Donruss set itself, I'm going to talk about it at a different time. But for Leaf, that was the high-end brand, and there was pretty stiff competition because Upper Deck was making really nice cards, and so was Ultra. And since the hockey market was a very focused market, I mean, they really were going to need to earn their place, and they had a pretty good card set for that. The design for the 1993 Leaf set is a design where they have a three-quarter bleed card with an angled, almost like a slope down at the bottom with the team color, including marble. The richness of those colors really shine through. They make the card read beautifully. And it gives a spirit to the card that allows it to compete head-to-head with Ultra and with Upper Deck in 1993. Is it as good? It's up there, but at least it was a card that could stand out and be distinctive and look good against the competition. So they succeeded with that, but they also had holofoil that they were now using, and that showed up on the card back for the logo. So they had a little splash of something really unique and exotic on their cards that did help it to stand out. Now, the card set was a 2-set release. They had almost nothing in the set, just player cards. They did have something close to a subset, which was that their checklist cards included trophy winners on the front. So they have the shot from the trophy event, and basically the front of the cards are highly collectible cards dedicated to individual players, and then on the back, of course, it's a checklist. And that was a big upgrade over what they had been doing over in baseball, where the baseball cards in 1993 were not done specifically to an individual player, but for hockey they did, which was a great combination. They also did 2 cards for the expansion teams, the Anaheim Ducks and the Florida Panthers. These cards were a logo on the front, and then on the back a little bit of an explanation about the new team. But they weren't grouped together. They showed up in basically at cards number 100, 150, and 200. They had special cards. And obviously these 2 cards were the Anaheim Ducks and the Florida Panthers. There were special cards dedicated to these new teams. But the third of those 3 cards I mentioned was dedicated to the Stanley Cup winning Montreal Canadiens. On the front they have a portrait of the whole team, and then on the back they have a shot of Patrick Waugh with the trophy that it takes up the entire card. They don't even bother to talk about it because it's pretty self-explanatory, but it is a pretty neat card. But that was all that they did for the set. They didn't do anything else. They did, however, have a lot of inserts, and a lot of good inserts. And most of these insert sets are across both series, so half in one series and half in the other. Now, the first insert set is not one of those. It was only released in one series, which is the Freshman Phenoms. And this card set is a 3/4 bleed card with a fade down at the bottom, and then they have some gold foil down there, and they have a shooting star theme on the card. And the star on that shooting star is gold foil. And the card is not overly designed. It's a very simple card with a splash of color that's just enough to give a compliment. It's a well-designed card. This is pretty good. Now, they also did their gold leaf, or their leaf gold all-star cards. Here, this is a card that is way too simplistic. It is a 3/4 bleed card and then a whole box of gold holofoil down at the bottom. Then they have subtractive text with team colors for the player name, and it's pretty boxy. But these cards are double fronted. So they have a player on one side and they have another player on the other as if it's a front. Obviously, the card number shows up on one side and lets you know which one is the front and which side is the back. But these cards they were a very flashy and exciting card in 1993. I don't know that these cards have aged well, but they're more difficult to come by, and they're very, very distinct, that's for sure. Now, their Leaf Gold rookies are different. This is a well-designed card where they have 3 different colors of text on the front. One of those colors is actually a red prism for the word rookie on the side. The card is well laid out, except there's one thing that's very difficult to see on the front, which is the player, which is too bad because it's supposed to showcase the player, but they got so worked up about making a really nice design that they kind of forgot about the whole player image part. He's on there, but it's not a card that is used to showcase the new player, for better or for worse. But it's a pretty cool card regardless. Then they have Hat Trick. And Hat Trick is a card set. This is, again, Series 1 and Series 2, like most of these are. The first card in the set is not a Mario Lemieux card as much as it is a title card. And so Mario Lemieux is on the front because he's pretty good at getting hat tricks. On the back, it talks about the hat trick itself, kind of an explanation. And it's kind of unusual that you have a series where half is in one series and half is in the other, and yet the first card taking up the first portion of the set is a title card. That makes the second set a little bit top heavy, but at any rate, they have a title card, and then they do have the rest of the cards are designed in basically the same way. It is a full bleed card. The Hat Trick logo is kind of stuffed over on the side because now it's more of a focus on the player himself. And then on the back they have statistics, and it's so that's the Hat Trick set. Then they have a set dedicated to Mario Lemieux. This is, again, it's across 2 sets. These cards are 3/4 bleed with a black box down at the bottom and a really nice, kind of elegant look to it. A little bit of foil on the card. And the card set does also have an autographed card that can be found. So that fills out the card set a little bit, but it's a card set dedicated to Mario Lemieux, which there aren't a lot of card sets that are dedicated to one player in this era. So it's nice that Donruss did this. They also did a set called Painted Warriors, and this is kind of an answer to what Pinnacle was doing with their Masks cards. Now, with Pinnacle, the Masks cards focus entirely on the helmet and they do a good job of presenting the artistry of the helmet. Well, with the Painted Warriors cards, they didn't do quite the same thing. They made it more about the player than about the masks. But it is still a card set dedicated to goalies. And they have kind of a Polynesian-like design for the Painted Warriors logo, which I don't know they could have pulled that off today, but it certainly fit for the time in the early 90s. Now, the last insert set that they have is called Donruss or Leaf Studio. And the Leaf Studio card is, so over in baseball, the first non-Donruss Leaf set that the company made was Studio. And these are sets of portraits. And by 1993, they had they had redefined how the cards were approached. Well, over in hockey, they didn't want to release a studio set yet, or like pretty much forever. They would do it eventually, but early on they didn't want to release that. So instead they did an insert set using the exact same design that was used in baseball for 1993. The card has a shot of fabric behind with the team logo on it, and then the player is in front of that. But it also has a signature in gold holofoil on the card, which is it's a really cool effect on the card. And that was the set. So the set was successful enough that they had no problem continuing on into 1994. Now the 1994 design is a lot less showy, a lot less showy. I mean, it was 1994, so everybody got rid of the borders, and Leaf was no different. They had a full bleed image with, here they were using holofoil for the little placard for the Leaf logo as well as for the player names. So if you want to know who the player is, I would highly advise that you look on the back, not on the front, because it's very difficult to read. But it is a pretty distinct card amongst all of the borderless cards of 1994. It's not necessarily a showy card, but it has a nice look to it with the holofoil, which is pretty unusual. But this set, still released with the Series 1 and Series 2, it did not have any special cards in the card set. I mean, even the checklists were done as just a straightforward checklist. You know, for better or for worse, they are very, very nice checklists, but Donruss and Leaf were now getting away from the fancy checklist that we'd been able to enjoy in the previous years. So here, it's just a checklist, and that means that for the card set, well, there is nothing else to talk about. It's just basically just the player cards. But they do have upgrades for their inserts. The inserts in most of the inserts in 1994 are a lot better than in 1993. Starting with their goalie set called In the Crease. And this is a card that is horizontal, which is really, let's face it, the best way to do goalie cards in almost all cases. You can do upright goalie cards that look good, but taking the landscape is really a great approach to do with this, and that's what this card set is about. It has a really nice splash of color, which also corresponds with the holofoil text for In the Crease, and then you have a holofoil logo on there as well, so it has a really rich color quality that comes through on these cards that looks really good. Then they have a set called Fire on Ice, and this is the low point for all the inserts. This is a card where they covered the entire background with holofoil, which really flattens the card. It has a nice flashy quality to it, but it doesn't have any of the intricacy and delicacy that you see in just about every other one of these cards. They're still nice cards, you know, don't get me wrong, but they just lack the spirit that most of the other cards have. Speaking of which, the Gold Leaf Rookies is, okay, this is a really impressive card. Now, the card is designed where they have two sides. They have a very tall image on one side, and then they have a band down the other side that has a bunch of little images in it that is chromed, so it's really difficult to see them. Down at the bottom, they have a team logo, but it gives an interest, an intricacy. It gives a reason to kind of explore the card, which is kind of cool. But the big thing about this card is that they have the Gold Leaf Rookies text in a gold holofoil prismatic text on the image, which brings out something on the card that just makes it look really impressive, really stand out. Speaking of which, they also have their Gold Leaf Stars, which is a card set that is basically, it is what the Gold All-Star cards were in 1993. In 1994, they dramatically upgraded it with using a Donruss Elite type of a design concept for these cards. But here they have a prismatic gold holofoil for the border on the outside and inside of the card, making it look really rich. And these cards, like with the Gold All-Stars in 1993, they're double-sided. They have faces on both sides. They have two players on each of these cards. Really impressive cards. Really cool to see. And like in 1993, where they were showcasing Donruss Studio, in 1994 they showed off an up-and-coming set called Leaf Limited. Now, they would release a whole Leaf Limited set, but they did a preview set here with these cards, which is a Series 1 and Series 2 release where they have veterans in Series 1 and then rookies in Series 2. These cards do look exactly like the actual Leaf Limited cards that you see in the main set, so you would have to look on the back to see the number series in order to really know the difference between these insert cards and the main set. And they did one other set called Phenoms. And with Phenoms, this is a card that has not quite a metallic quality to it, but it is a chromed surface, and each one of the cards has a protective film over the front and a little tag on it as well, which really gets in the way. Kind of like what Finest was doing, except Finest didn't block the card. These cards did do exactly that. And so you can either find the cards with the protective film still on it or taken off in order for the cards the richness of the card design to really come through. I personally, I'm always on the team of keeping it on once you've changed it forever. But either way, you can find them either way. But that brings it to a close. So those were the first two Leaf sets that Donruss released in hockey in 1994, or 1993 and in 1994. They were off to a good start. These were good sets, but it was mainly about the inserts. And the 1994 set really got the inserts going well. So it was a lot more fun. I'm going to be looking at Leaf Limited and the later Leaf sets in another video. I'll be looking at that later on, so definitely look out for those videos. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, I do urge you to do so. And thank you very much for watching.